Andrew Wright from Your Board Mate. Quick question for you. If your major funding source disappeared tomorrow, would your organisation still survive? Would it exist? And if it would, do you think it would be doing the same work? If you hesitated on either answer, we need to talk about something uncomfortable, and that is mission drift and funding dependency. Now, this can go for private businesses as well, but primarily we're talking about not-for-profits today. So what I want to talk about is the independence test. Is your organisation still serving its mission? Here's something about the not-for-profit sector in Australia that you might not know about. And that is that there's over 600,000 registered not-for-profits in this country. 600,000. Many of these are small volunteer operations, your local hall committee, your sports committee, neighbourhood groups, small community organisations. But many aren't. Thousands of not-for-profits employ staff, deliver significant services and manage substantial budgets. But here's what matters. A large portion of that funding comes from government sources, federal, state, local, across all levels. And before you think this is heading somewhere political, it's not. This is about governance, organisational independence, and something I've seen derail well-meaning organisations, the slow drift from serving your mission to serving your funding source. Let me describe a pattern I've seen many times as a CEO in turnarounds and as an advisor. Year one, the organisation has a clear mission. We exist to support families and people dealing with X. Great, clear purpose, community need identified, everything's aligned. Year two, government announces funding for programs addressing Y issue, not X. It's related to your work, sort of. Board discusses, well, we could adapt our services to qualify for this funding. It's still helping families, just slightly different focus. Subsequently, application submitted, funding approved, everyone celebrates. Year three, original mission activities are now unfunded or minimally unfunded. 80% of your budget is government-funded programs. But here's the thing, you're doing good work. People are being helped, you're getting good results. Funding's paying for staff, facilities, professional services. All good. Year five, someone at the board meeting asks, remember when we started that community program that we used to run? Why did we stop that? Silence. Crickets, because no one can remember the decision. It just sort of faded away because it wasn't funded, because government priorities shifted and they've got every right to shift their priorities. But you followed the money rather than your mission. Year seven, new government elected, different priorities. Funding program ends. Suddenly, your organisation faces crisis, not because community need disappeared, but because you built everything around a funding source rather than your mission. So let's talk about the mathematics of this, because it's significant and not enough people are discussing this, in my opinion. As a quick sidebar, doing the maths on a whole range of issues in and around your businesses, in fact in everything, is always extremely helpful, as it can highlight when many things that we take at face value literally don't add up. Anyway, back to it, the maths. 600,000 not-for-profits in Australia. Even if only 10% are substantially government funded, that's still 60,000 organisations. And these organisations employ hundreds of thousands of people. They deliver services for millions of Australians. They represent collectively also an enormous voting bloc and sphere of influence. And here's where the governance gets really interesting. When your organisation is 70 to 80% government funded, when funding decisions determine whether your staff have jobs. When compliance with funding requirements dominate your board meetings, whose interests are you really serving? Now, I'm not suggesting conspiracy. I'm not suggesting corruption. I'm not suggesting any wrongdoing. I'm simply observing a structural reality. When you're dependent on a funding source, that source influences your priorities, whether you consciously intend it or not. The same goes for partnerships, investments, and other funding sources. And from a pure democratic governance perspective, that concentration of influence should concern all of us, regardless of political preference. So here are the governance questions your boards has to be asking, and apply these whether you're government funded, corporate funded, or donor funded. So first question, the mission alignment test. If we removed all funding requirements tomorrow, would we still be doing the same activities? And if not, why not? Are we serving our mission or serving our funding source? Question 2. The dependency assessment. What percentage of our funding comes from one source? And what's our contingency if that disappears? Do we have funding diversification that protects our independence? Question 3. Decision-making audit. In the last 12 months, how many strategic decisions were driven by funding opportunities versus community or client needs? And when those conflict, which wins? Question 4. Voice and advocacy. Can we publicly disagree with our major funders' policies if they contradict our mission and our values? Or would that risk our funding? If it would, what does that tell us about our independence and our mission? And finally, question 5, the exit scenario. Could we exist without our current funding model? Not thrive necessarily, but exist and serve our core mission. If not, are we an independent organisation or a service delivery arm? Now, here's what I've learned from organisational involvement and turnarounds. Mission drift is insidious precisely because it feels justified at every step. Incremental changes, incremental progress. And we say things like, we need to keep the lights on. This funding helps us to help more people. We can still serve our mission just a bit differently. And if we don't take this funding, someone else will. Now, each and every statement there is true. Every step feels reasonable and defensible, in fact. But 5 years later, you're running someone else's priorities with your organisation's name on it. And the really uncomfortable truth, this isn't necessarily anyone's fault. Governments need services delivered. Funding programs have requirements. Organisations need resources. Individual decisions all make sense. But collectively, we've created a sector where organisational independence is increasingly rare, where funding dependency shapes priorities as much as community needs, where the democratic influence represented by 600,000 organisations becomes concentrated in whoever controls the funding. And that's what should concern us. Not from left or right or middle or up or down, but from a governance and democratic health perspective. So what's the alternative? I'm not suggesting not-for-profits should refuse all government funding. That's neither realistic nor sensible. Here's a few strategies. Number 1, diversification as policy. So the board policy then, no single funding source exceeds 40% of total budget. Force yourself to maintain funding diversity that protects independence. Yes, this is harder. Yes, it limits growth potential, but it preserves your ability to serve your mission rather than your funders. You can do both at the same time. Strategy 2, mission decision framework. Every strategic decision gets evaluated through 2 lenses. Mission alignment first, funding opportunity second. And if they conflict, document why you're choosing funding over mission. Make it conscious, not an unconscious drift. Strategy 3, reserve building. target reserves that could sustain core mission activities for 12 months without current funding. That's reserve finances. This gives you the financial independence to make mission-driven decisions, even when they conflict with funding requirements. Strategy 4, advocacy independence. Board policy preserving your right to publicly disagree with funders' policies when they conflict with your mission or your community's needs. If you can't afford this independence, you need to question whether you are truly independent. Strategy 5, regular mission audits. So an annual review. Compare current activities to the original mission. For any significant differences, document the rationale. Are you evolving responsibly or drifting unconsciously, bobbing away like a little boat on the ocean? Now, I know this is uncomfortable territory. Questioning funding relationships feels risky when you're trying to keep services running and people employed. But here's my experiences. Organisations that preserve their mission independence are more resilient when circumstances change. They survive funding cuts because they don't build everything around one source of funding. They maintain community support because they're seen as genuine advocates rather than service contractors. And from that broader democratic perspective I mentioned, a healthy not-for-profit sector needs to maintain genuine independence from any single influence source, not because government is bad or wrong, not because funding is corrupt, but because democracy functions better when organisations can operate with genuine, mission-driven independence. So, a few questions for your board. Are you still serving your mission, or has funding dependency shifted your priorities without you consciously choosing that? Could you say no to funding that contradicts your mission, or would that threaten your existence? Do you have the financial independence and governance structures to preserve mission alignment even when it's harder or less lucrative? Now, these aren't easy questions, but they're necessary ones that I think would be really helpful for your organisation and the sector to ask. I'm Andrew Wright from Your Boardmate. If your organisation is wrestling with these governance questions, mission drift, funding dependency, maintaining independence while staying viable, that's exactly the kind of strategic challenge where expert guidance helps. Our advisory service provides frameworks and support to work through these complex governance issues. You'll find our free intake template on the description below and on the website, and it helps us to understand your specific situation so we can provide targeted guidance that works for your circumstances. Because preserving mission integrity whilst maintaining funding realities is a challenge. That's simple to understand, but not easy to implement. And that's where experienced guidance makes the difference. Your Boardmate at www.businessunbuzzed.com. Thank you.